income-based representation. What is income-based representation? What is income-based representation? Income-based representation is political representation based on the population's income. Representation based on income is a more representative representation. In addition to choosing representatives from a geographical district, income-based representation allows for voters to choose representatives based on similar income levels as determined by a candidate's federal income tax bracket. Each state would have 6 brackets based on marginal tax rates of the federal income tax. Candidates would compete with other candidates from their own tax bracket. Why is this necessary? Because of the growing income inequality and a political system that is increasingly based on money, it is important to reform the process of choosing representatives to account for these changes to ensure legitimate political representation. There's currently not enough representatives to represent the population properly, so a new apportionment act would need to be passed. How is this possible? With a few simple revisions to existing law. Amend U.S. Code Title II, Chapter 1, Section 2. Replace the language, "the method of equal proportions," with "tax bracket apportionment." What is the difference between the method of equal proportions and tax bracket apportionment? The method of equal proportions apportions representatives to the states sequentially in order to prevent a tie or an unfair distribution of representation. Despite the intentions of this method, the unfair distribution of representation increases along with the population. There is now 435 representatives as there was in 1911. The much larger population now, relative to the static number of representatives, continues to dilute representation for the sake of incumbency protection. Tax bracket apportionment divides the populations of each state into the 6 federal income tax brackets. The number of representatives from each state are apportioned by a divisor determined by statute applied to the populations of those tax brackets. Candidates compete for available seats as determined by apportionment in their own tax brackets as determined by their tax returns. For instance, with a divisor of 30,000, if a state had 100,000 people in tax bracket 1, that state would get 3 seats for representatives from that tax bracket, which then candidates from that tax bracket would compete for those seats. Reapportionment. The current law is based on 435 representatives, which sets the divisor around 700,000 and growing. To change this, we would need to amend U.S. Code Title II, Chapter 1, Section B, where it states, "Each state shall be entitled, etc., to the number of representatives shown in the statement transmitted to the Congress on January 8, 1941. So what we would need to do is replace "on January 8, 1941 with "after each decennial census as determined by statute." This will allow for adjustments to the number of representatives as determined by statute after each decennial census, if required. A constitutional amendment is not needed, requiring only majority vote legislation to pass reapportionment. U.S. Code Title II, Chapter 1, Section 2A, Subsection 2 states, "If there is an increase in the number of representatives, such additional representative or representatives shall be elected from the state at large. New representatives could be elected at large and vote from their home states." Resistance to income-based representation should be expected. Many people don't like democracy at all, or representative government. There is an ongoing campaign right now to reduce voters from the voting rolls to protect incumbents. Incumbency is another reason for resistance. The very first presidential veto was to prevent Congress from passing a self-serving apportionment act that violated the Constitution. Compare the population from 1911 to the population of 2012. Compare airplane technology. Transportation technology. Science and engineering technologies. Compare communication technologies. Compare the technologies to facilitate democracy. To the technology to obstruct democracy. If you believe in democracy and representative government, we are attempting to organize in 50 states to spread the word about income-based representation. So if you can, please consider making a donation through the website. Spread the word. Income-based representation by public voter. Political solutions for the public.